Welcome. I'm William Barth, your co-host of the Praxis Report.
And I'm Jonathan Brown.
Today we have a real special Praxis Report. Again, that's the show that analyzes and applies political theory and to current political challenges that we face, and then tries to suggest some practical strategies which progressives and people who care about human civilization and its progress uh, can implement in light of the political challenges we face. But we think our theoretical analysis is unique in that regard. We're not just analyzing news events. We're trying to go a little deeper and apply some political theory to the political questions of the day. So today we have a really important one, as everybody knows, the what we call the Trump Peace Initiative. And so me and John are going to talk about a little bit about that today.
Yeah, so the big event that's in the news that everyone is having a meltdown over is Donald Trump and JD Vance getting into a very heated exchange with Ukrainian President Zelensky at the White House. And the whole thing descended into a bit of a shouting match. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide our analysis of this video. We're going to show some clips, and Will and I have been following this issue for years. Right when this kicked off in 2022 with the Russian special military operation, we analyzed this as a NATO war of aggression that sort of pressed Russia into action. And I believe now it looks like our analysis is being confirmed, and liberals are not happy with that. What are your initial thoughts of?
Yeah. I mean, I think you provide a good theoretical framework, John, which is, you present it as we've always sort of analyzed it as a sort of a continuation of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, and sort of managing the U.S.-Soviet relationship and the historic battle between the NATO alliance and the Warsaw Pact military alliance protecting the Soviet Union. So what we're seeing is sort of an outgrowth of this, and you've sort of analyzed this as Ukraine just simply being sort of a pawn in that continuing struggle. Of course, the Soviet Union is over. The Russian Federation is not a so-called communist state any longer. Why the Russian Federation is not integrated into the European Community or the Council of Europe, is not unknown, but it's likely in order to continue this Cold War, which is so beneficial to so many parties, particularly what we call the military-industrial complex. That's
Right.
defense contractors here in the United States. Don't forget, the Cold War meant billions of dollars of profits for defense contractors, and the end of the Cold War also means substantial cuts in the military budget and so forth. So we've always analyzed this as the need to resurrect that Cold War, and clearly that's what's happening here. But I don't want to get too far into the weeds. Why don't
Yeah.
we move on?
That's a perfect analysis. So we're gonna really get into what Trump and Zelensky talked about because that will allow us to really cover all these issues. So let's pull up this video and we're gonna watch a clip here. This is Zelensky getting a little upset with Trump and JD Vance. So we're gonna watch this real quick, and me and Will will give you our analysis.
Policy, JD, you are speaking about. What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
President, Mr.
strong-
President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this
Have you
conflict.
ever been to Ukraine? That you
Okay, so
Yeah.
right there, a
Yeah, it's
first
a good clip, John.
Um,
Very good clip.
this issue, JD Vance points out that Ukraine is in fact losing the war. Now, the media, the Western media in the United States and across Europe has been telling us for years that Ukraine is winning. And here, the vice president is telling us that Ukraine is forcing conscripts to go to fight because they're running out of soldiers. So, Will,
Yeah, that's an interesting issue that Ukraine is having an epidemic problem with draft dodgers. Those of us from the 60s remember, the draft and dodging the draft. In Ukraine, the problem's epidemic, and apparently the state, Ukraine has adopted very harsh members against its own people for draft dodging. So it makes you wonder, what are we doing here? This is a country that this is a country that doesn't want to fight for itself. In other words, I remember President John Kennedy used to always say, we can help them, we can support them, but in the end, it's their fight. They have to fight it for themselves with regards to the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
So what's going on here? This is a country where people don't want to fight for their country any longer. Are draft dodging in mass have to be
Yeah.
forcibly conscripted, and apparently the average age of the average soldier is like somewhere in the mid 40s in Ukraine, and soldiers as old as in their 60s are fighting.
Right.
What is going on here?
Well, they're just getting pushed into a meat grinder, and I think what we're seeing is that the most prominent fighters in the Ukraine military are the Azov Battalion, which is a neo-Nazi
Yeah.
brigade.
I would correct that, John. I don't
Yeah,
think it's neo-Nazi.
it's
I
just
think it's
Nazi.
a Nazi brigade.
Yes, and so
I
we
mean,
have
outright Nazi brigade. I mean,
outright
they're
Nazi
not they're
brigade.
not
You're right.
reinventing Nazism for a new day. They're
That's
just
right. They're in fact heroizing the World War II era Ukrainian collaborators who supported Hitler, and in order to create this sort of Ukrainian national identity around glorifying Nazi figures from World War II. And that is something that is very prominent in Ukrainian society. In fact, even when Canadian Parliament brought a so-called Ukrainian war hero from World War II over to Parliament to be honored, this guy was 90 something years old. Turned out the guy that they honored was actually a Nazi who fought.
yeah, that was a relatively recent event.
That was a recent event. And,
Yeah.
and so we have seen the liberals in the West rehabilitate Nazis who have.
By the way, John, I'll mention I just posted on my Facebook page today a little note on the 2019 Ukrainian language law, which of course banned the use of the Russian language. And don't forget, almost 20% of Ukraine's population is ethnic Russian,
That's right.
ethnic Russians, which shows you the civil war aspect of the Ukrainian conflict, because you have a very large ethnic Russian population living in Ukraine.
Who are being
But
suppressed.
not only did they ban the use in 2019, the use of Russian language in education and governmental services, but a very interesting note, Ukraine also banned the use of Yiddish language, which is the language of European Jews or European Jewry. And this harkens back or actually
Our
sort of
ancestors.
the historic anti-Semitism of Ukraine, and of course, if you read some of the Nazi literature put out by the Nazi Azov Battalion, which American liberals support openly and apparently knowingly, you'll see vicious both anti-black and anti-Semitic sorts of statements. So, on my Facebook, we remember in the old segregated South in the United States, no Jews, no blacks, no dogs allowed.
Right.
And that's the kind of signs we can expect to see posted in the Ukraine that we are supposedly fighting to liberate.
That's a perfect analysis. Let's watch another clip here. This is where it gets heated, where Trump kind of gets in and goes off against Zelensky. So let's watch this real quick.
And I'll have some comments on that.
Yeah.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know.
bless. You will not
You
have
gotta-
war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling.
Okay. Well, I want to show more, but I kind of want to stop it right there, because what Zelensky is saying, he's using an old neoconservative pro-war propaganda talking point, which is if you look at, like, let's say during the Iraq War after 9/11, the neoconservatives said we have to fight the terrorists over there so they don't come and fight us over here. So Zelensky's saying the same thing. He's saying to America, if you don't use Ukraine as this pawn to fight Russia over there in their backyard, then Russia's going to come across the ocean and attack and invade and bomb America. And
Right.
Trump
And
shut
I might,
Zelensky down.
I might add to that, John. And this was the classic argument used in the 1960s.
The Vietnam,
It's called the domino theory.
the domino
So,
theory. That's right.
yeah,
Can you explain what that is?
if we don't stop the communists in Vietnam from taking Vietnam, the communists will roll over into Laos and Cambodia and to the Philippine Islands and ultimately into Australia and New Zealand and take over all of Southeast Asia. This is the exact argument being used about the current day Russian Federation, that if we don't stop the Russians from fighting to liberate or create autonomy for the Russian population that actually lives in Ukraine, the 20% that was under attack for the last 10 or 20 years, and thousands have died, that the Russians will soon attack France and Germany and move their way into Great Britain.
And move our way to the United States. And I think what really pissed Trump off was Zelensky telling America that we're going to feel Russia's attacking us. And to Trump's credit, we have had president after president, like you said, going back to Truman and the domino theory of containment. This is the first time we've had an American president actually push back against pro-war propaganda and say, no, the evil communist horde are not going to roll across the world and take us over. Shut up, Zelensky. Stop feeding the American people lies to justify a war. And I thought, to his credit, that was a great thing that Trump did to shut him down on that point alone.
And also Trump gets it. I mean, he clearly, when we talk about NATO a lot, but I mean, think of it. You have NATO is a hostile military alliance from the Russian Federation point of view. Its purpose is to annihilate the Russian Federation.
Right.
So imagine a hostile military alliance on the Russian border where Russia was already previously attacked not long ago, a generation ago in World War II.
By the Nazis.
Border. And 27 million Russians dying to defeat Nazism and Nazi Germany. And now a new hostile military alliance reestablished with setting up nuclear tipped missiles, targeting Moscow. And people talk about Putin. I'm telling you that no Russian president, if Boris Yeltsin was resurrected and became Russian president tomorrow, if we succeeded at regime change, Boris Yeltsin would never stand for a hostile military alliance in Ukraine set up with establishing missiles in Ukraine targeting Moscow. Yeltsin wouldn't stand for it. Putin wouldn't stand for it. If anything, I think if Putin was pushed out, you'd have a far more aggressive Russian president installed. And not. So I think this what do they call it? Cult of personality that they're making that liberals make over Putin is a big mistake, because I think if anything, Putin's been relatively restrained when you look at the actual events that took place in Ukraine over the last 10, 20 years, which included the coup d'etat of the country's government, attacks on Russian minorities that live in Ukraine, irrespective of right or wrong. Look at, again, the banning of the Russian language, the banning of Yiddish, for God's sakes.
Right.
All of these things, the corruption of Ukraine, it's one of the most corrupt countries in Europe, all of these things. Russia, actually, Putin sort of held back for many years before he actually offensively tried to do anything about it.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah, that's very true. Let's watch a little more. Trump continues in this.
Yeah, I want to comment on just one comment on this, John. Maybe you could reflect on it. You got to remember, this is the first time anyone has ever negotiated over the issue of ending the war. No one has talked to anyone about ending this war or negotiating having a peace negotiation over the potential of ending the war. This is the first time. So what you're seeing here, and this is a classic negotiation scenario. any initial negotiation scenario, anyone who's studied negotiations know the initial meetings are usually very hostile because people are pent up. They're getting emotions off their chest.
Yeah.
They're angry. And in this case, there's a war going on. People are being murdered in mass. So of course, there's a lot of pent up hostility. So yeah, you would expect an initial meeting of any negotiation, even a negotiation over a pay raise in a
I
local
think
school board.
I think the ironic thing is that it's happening in front of the cameras, which is usually not the case.
Right, and
Out
this
in
might
front of
be,
the whole.
that you might call this Trump's showmanship or
Yes,
The Hollywoodization of politics, whatever.
absolutely.
But that is our politics. I mean, that
Yeah.
is the
Well,
nature of our.
let's watch this clip and we'll continue because
Okay, then we'll talk more.
there's a lot of stuff that Trump says in this next part that I want to hear your commentary on.
Yeah.
We're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly
Remember
what
this.
you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're gonna feel.
You
We're gonna feel very
you will
good.
feel influenced.
We're gonna feel
I'm-
very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you, You
strong.
will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the very
bad position,
beginning
and
of
he
the
happens
war.
to be right
From
about
the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not in a
Mr.
good
Trump,
position.
I was-
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
Not playing
cards.
cards.
Right now, you don't,
We're
you're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing
We're
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
What do you
You're
think
gambling
about-
with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I'm
That's
with
back
all
to
respect
you. Far more than a lot of people said
Where
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
Okay, so right there, Trump used the term World War III. He said to Zelensky, "You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're trying to push the world into a war, another war." So, what do you make of this, Will?
Well,
And
I,
in particular, why do you think that the liberals, every single liberal, is hysterical, angry at Trump for pointing out that we should prevent World War III? Liberals want, all I can conclude is that the liberal class, the liberals want to escalate into a third world war because they have a fanatical hatred against Trump and against Putin and against Russia. That's my initial gut reaction, is that there's just been, since 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost the election, they created this hoax, this conspiracy theory that Putin, he's this puppet master pulling the strings of Donald Trump, and therefore it served the purpose of manufacturing consent for war against Russia, to demonize Russia, to demonize Putin. And now we're seeing liberals have become so hysterical in their hatred of Russia and Putin that they're willing to risk nuclear war. They're willing to go to World War III. I don't know. What is your thought?
well, the thought is, it's an incredible postmodern irony that it's Donald Trump who has taken the initiative to try to capture the peace mantle and try to and raise the issue of the threat of global thermonuclear war. Now, that issue, global thermonuclear war, had been prior at one point one of the sort of most fundamental challenges that progressives have faced. In other words, no nukes, nuclear test ban treaties, ending the use of nuclear weapons.
Right.
That was one of the greatest issues that liberals and progressives have been pushing for the last, I mean, for decades. But ironically, in a terrible irony, that issue has been abandoned. Now, the threat of thermonuclear war is no less today than it was in the 1960s. If anything, it's far greater. The lead organization on this is the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which was started by Albert Einstein and other scientists who invented atomic power and the atomic bomb. And that's an active organization. Former governor Jerry Brown was the former head of the organization, and they have a device called the Doomsday Time Clock, which shows you how close human civilization is to an actual thermonuclear exchange. And the clock is set something like 60 seconds to midnight, meaning we're very close to the prospect of an accidental launch of thermonuclear missiles.
So why do you think that the liberals have become the war party? Why have they become the party that is pushing for an escalation of
Yeah,
war against Russia?
I think there was sort of probably, and I'm just speculating a bit, but I think there were two strands that came out of the Vietnam War of the 60s. One was this idea that we needed to be, we needed to create a truly sort of anti-war uh, political base and party led by people like Tom Hayden and Martin Luther King Jr. And other progressive leaders,
Right.
and Robert F. Kennedy Sr. and others. And then, but there was another stream of the party which said, no, the problem with Democrats are because they are liberal and want to help poor people and, care about the environment, they've got to be tougher and stronger. So they developed this sort of they sort of developed this idea that we must be pro-war, and the foreign policy that resulted was a disgustingly immoral and obnoxious policy of what they call these regime change wars fought throughout the world, whether and through countries throughout the world, including Vietnam and Iran prior, and countries in Africa, the Congo and other countries, and in contemporary times, of course, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now Ukraine, where America actually attacked Ukraine and created or sponsored a coup d'etat, which is an act of war by the United States against Ukraine. And the irony is, so many talk about, oh, we got to protect Ukraine. It was invaded by Russia. No, it's just the exact opposite. The sovereign state of Ukraine was invaded by Americans and the United States, who sponsored a coup d'etat, which overthrew its government, which resulted in part in the current day conflict.
That's right. And of course, as they always say, Ukraine is a sovereign country, it's a democratic country, yada 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 yada. Of course, we know that is not true, because they're leaving out the fact that the United States invaded Ukraine, overthrew its government, installed a new government, and has then funneled $300 billion into turning Ukraine into this, war machine, this puppet that can do it's almost, evil. It's very evil that what we've done to Ukraine, because Ukraine, essentially, when we're talking about conscripting people into the war, it's basically just throwing people into a meat grinder on behalf of the United States, so that Americans don't have to go fight Russia ourselves directly. We just funnel our weapons into Ukraine and make them die for us. And
Right.
I found that
That was a concept that started with the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon called it Vietnamization, meaning that, well, we're not gonna send American troops to fight the war. We're gonna allow Vietnamese to fight the war for the Americans, and let
right.
that's the idea of the Ukrainianization of the war. Of course, the Russian Federation, who lost 27 million people in World War II, are never going to allow a hostile military alliance, on its border.
Let's watch this next clip, because they actually talk about this part, this idea of the militarization of Ukraine, and we can comment a little more.
Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait,
answer?
no,
Can
you've
I-
done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this.
I,
You have a damn
We-
good chance of
we are
coming out
staying-
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
allowed.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only in
allowed.
this
We
cabinet.
gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank-
president, $350 billion.
You voted
We gave
for
you
your
military equipment.
You
And your
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
If
West?
if you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me.
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course.
Incredible.
Incredible. So Trump admits that Ukraine, the whole thing would have ended in 2 days, or maybe even, or 2 weeks, maybe even 3 days, if not for the fact that America has sent $350 billion worth of military equipment to them. So,
Right. But what fascinates me is that Trump embodies the entire anti-war pro-peace sort of movement, which is it's a very odd or phenomena. It's again one of these what you call these postmodern ironies that it's Trump. Maybe it's based on his history. He came out of the 60s. He lived in New York, and maybe he was touched, as the whole Vietnam War generation was, by the peace movement, because he's echoing all of the arguments made by the peace movement, the danger of again of nuclear war, the inadequacy of war as a vehicle to settle foreign policy disputes, and the whole idea of a Cold War. And the dangers of that with another nuclear power, especially a former World War II ally, the Russian peoples and the Russian Federation. So it's just incredible to me that Trump is really making these arguments, and you would expect, because this is the first time anyone has even talked peace, that it would be very emotional and very angry, and Trump is confronting the war machine here, and to his credit. So I don't know what to say about it other than you have to support Trump on this.
And I would just say to our liberal friends, you are wrong on this issue. You have been wrong the entire time, and it is now being exposed that you have decided with the war machine. You have sided with the military industrial complex. The liberals are now the neocons. They are the ones pushing to escalate into nuclear war with Russia. They are playing a dangerous game, and everyone that's posting these stand with Ukraine on their social media, they are supporting a Nazi regime. They are supporting a proxy war that is escalating us into World War III, because they have a very limited understanding of geopolitics. Their whole view of the world is based on personality. Trump is a bad personality. We don't like Trump. Therefore, anything Trump says is bad. If Trump says we should have no nuclear war, then the liberals are going to say, let's
We
go and
want
start
nuclear
nuclear
war.
war. If
Yeah.
Trump says we don't want World War III, liberals are going to say, no, we're going to bomb and cause World War III with Russia. So it's as you say, it's a postmodern irony. But just like the neocons were wrong about the Iraq War, and they were wrong about Vietnam, they were wrong about Afghanistan and Libya and Syria, they were wrong about Gaza, and they are wrong about Ukraine.
About this one.
They are wrong.
Yeah, the U.S. war. This is the U.S. war on the Russian Federation, and they're wrong about war on Russia and hands off Russia. And Russia is our ally against Nazism, and it's that simple.
Let's go back to that. Let's go back to the World War II era when America and Russia were allies, and as allies helped save the world from the scourge of fascism. That is what we need to return to. This whole demonization of Russia since the Cold War is a sad chapter in history, and it is frankly very sad that liberals are repeating these tired 1950s Cold War McCarthyite slurs.
Right.
But we are, I think, beginning to overcome that. If things go according to plan and there is a diplomatic agreement, I think it will be good for the whole world. It will be good for Russia, good for America, and good for Ukraine to end this senseless war.
Yeah, and again, for our liberal Democrat friends, again, think about it. I mean, do you really believe that Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and George Bush had the answers to our foreign policies after Iraq, after Afghanistan, and the disasters of those wars in which what 500,000 or more people were murdered? These are the
Remarkable. They love Dick Cheney. They love
modern day liberal Democratic Party. We're going to get into this a little more in our, I know, future episodes, John,
yeah.
on the liberals who promote this pro-war policy,
Yeah.
and have abandoned the anti-war peace movement. So
Well,
this
we
is a
will
really good
continue the
question. We're going to address
discussion.
it.
Continue the discussion in the future episodes. But thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate our viewers and listeners. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, and support us on Patreon. We are the Praxis Report. We are the revolutionary podcast where we try to combine theory with action. I am your co-host, Jonathan Brown,
And I'm your other co-host, William Barth.
and we will see you guys next time. Peace.